The Nova you're about to see is a special program by producer-reporter Peter Williams on the first American test tube baby. His responsible reporting on the early developments of this medical breakthrough in Britain gave him and Nova exclusive access to record the American story. Much of this film was made before the birth of baby Elizabeth. You may have seen news stories about the birth, but Nova now brings you the full story of test tube baby Elizabeth Jordan Carr.
Judy is 28 years old. She's been married 9 years, 9 childless years. But at last, she's pregnant. And today, at the Eastern Virginia Medical Center, using a technique called ultrasound, she sees on the monitor the baby she's been carrying for 7 months. And this is a remarkable baby, the first baby to be conceived in America outside the mother's body by a process called in vitro fertilization.
You can see the heart beating right here. And
can you tell yet what sex it's going to be? Is it still too early? Or?
Right now, it's probably still too early.
America's first test tube baby. That's the description this child has been given ever since the news of the pregnancy was released. It's not a description that pleases the mother.
I am very uncomfortable with the term test tube. It's an inappropriate term, and it conjures up all sorts of horrible images. I think of George Orwell's 1984 and the alpha and the beta and the test tube thing, and the fact that a test tube is not used is what's even more disconcerting. It bothers me because I think it's a negative term, and I'm sorry that seems to be the term that has captured everyone. It is in vitro fertilization. It's the fertilization of the husband's sperm and the wife's eggs in a petri dish.
In vitro fertilization, literally in glass. The glass is the dish in which her husband's sperm was introduced to the egg taken from Judy's body. In 1978 in Britain, Louise Brown became the world's first so-called test tube baby. She was the culmination of 10 years of research. Some had said that in vitro fertilization might cause abnormalities, but Louise was born normal and healthy. Since then, in Britain and Australia, more than 20 similar babies have been born, and today perhaps 100 more women are expecting test tube babies around the world. When Judy and Roger Carr married in Maine in 1973, they never dreamed that this could have any significance in their lives. Roger is a mechanical engineer, Judy a teacher. She was still studying. Did they want a family at once?
No, I had to finish my education first, and I had about 2 more years to go. So that's what we did, and as soon as that was over with, that's when we started.
Normally, a woman becomes pregnant when, once a month, an egg is released into her fallopian tube. The egg is in a follicle that's produced from the ovary. After intercourse, the husband's sperm fertilizes the egg in the fallopian tube. This is a fertilized human egg that's been penetrated by the sperm. Once fertilized, the egg travels down the fallopian tube, attaches itself to the wall of the womb or the uterus, and grows into a baby. But for the Carrs, there were problems from the start. Judy quickly became pregnant, but it nearly killed her.
I went to the bed to try and get her up, and she was just as white as a sheet. I mean, just completely no color at all. And her eyes rolled back into her head. She started struggling for breaths. And, it just scared me to death. So I immediately called the doctor, said, we're going to bring her into the hospital. Now, how bad it was, we didn't find out until afterwards. If it had been like 10 more minutes, she would have had lost so much blood that she probably wouldn't have made it.
Back in my room, I knew that I had had surgery. And the original doctor came into the room, and he said, well, I have good news and bad news. And Roger was sitting there with me. And he said, the good news is you're alive. And I went, I know this, I'm aware of this fact. And the second thing is, he said, the bad news is you'll probably never have children.
The pregnancy had lodged in the fallopian tube and not the womb, an ectopic pregnancy. Judy experienced 2 more similar pregnancies in the first 5 years of marriage. After the 3rd operation in 4 years, she woke up in hospital. Both her tubes had been removed. Her chance of having a baby normally had gone.
Really, nothing had to be said. It had been said, and we knew what we were facing. About 2 days later, Dr. Sussman came into my room at the hospital alone. It was at night, and spent some time with me. And we had a conversation on, well, what was I going to do now? And had my husband and I talked about, would we ever have children? How, were we happy without having children? And I think I said, well, we're happy, but I don't want to be 40 years old and say, oh, I wish we had done something. And it's at that point that he brought up the topic of either adoption or in vitro fertilization.
That Judy is pregnant at all is due to Howard and Georgiana Jones. They're a husband and wife team. He's the gynecologist, she's the endocrinologist. For 35 years at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, the Joneses built a reputation for their work on human infertility. Then they decided to opt for what they thought would be a more relaxed life in semi-retirement in Norfolk, Virginia, even though some of the problems were still unsolved.
We had sort of resigned ourselves to accepting that the patient who had no tubes would probably be sterile, that we couldn't transplant ovaries, and therefore the patient who had no ovaries would be sterile. And we just put that 15% aside and said we'd continue to work on the others. And then we came to Norfolk.
And that happened to be the birthday of Louise Brown.
The story captured the world's headlines, and the Joneses had a link with the British team of Patrick Steptoe and Robert Edwards. Edwards had worked with them at Baltimore. A Norfolk reporter wanted to talk about it.
She came to our home as the man was moving in the boxes and the furniture, and we had an interview sitting on the boxes. And as she finished the interview, she asked us, could this be done in Norfolk? And we thought it was almost a joke, and we said, why, certainly. And she said, what would it take? And we said, a little money.
What happened?
A most extraordinary thing. Georgiana had a patient from Norfolk who had come to Baltimore with infertility. She was fortunate to have a child subsequent to that, and she called up Georgiana.
She said, Dr. Jones, I understand that Dr. Howard says that it will only take a little bit of money to bring a test tube baby clinic to Norfolk. And my family has a foundation which we would love to donate.
So couples began to come forward. Bob and Sarah Smith volunteered for the experimental program. They're school teachers who'd been married 5 years. They lived by the seashore near Norfolk.
The Smiths have a team approach. You cannot talk about Mrs. Smith without Mr. Smith. They were both very much interested in the whole scientific part of the procedure.
We were the very first couple, and everybody was so nervous. We were nervous, the doctors were nervous, the hospital was nervous. I mean, if anybody had gotten pregnant that first time around, it really would have been something else.
But controversy threatened the work from the start.
The future of the proposed Norfolk test tube baby clinic remains uncertain.
300 people jammed a public hearing in Norfolk this afternoon to debate the pros and cons of building this country's first test tube baby laboratory at Norfolk General Hospital.
Representatives of both sides of the controversy marshaled their forces to convince the agency to vote in their favor.
This afternoon, hundreds of people...
A routine hearing to seek state approval turned into an arena. The Joneses were accused of tampering with nature, experimenting with human embryos and putting babies at risk.
If there are, as Dr. Jones avers, quotes, no substantial risks in the program in England, why then did Dr. Steptoe have an agreement with Mrs. Brown to terminate?
We had 10 patients at the time who were going through their preliminary monitoring, and many of them wished to testify. And that, to me, was a very traumatic thing, because these people were not used to speaking in public, and they were, in effect, bearing their souls.
I'll be pregnant, not different. I have no fear that my child will be a freak, nor that I'm tampering with God's work in achieving pregnancy in this manner.
Somebody said in the background, oh, these poor people need Jesus. That's all they need is Jesus. And I already had Jesus, so I didn't understand that point at all.
I was used to maybe a cloistered scientific atmosphere. I really had never been called a liar in public.
The ramifications of in vitro research are almost incomprehensible. To illustrate, in vitro research will not necessarily unite a wife's ovum with her husband's sperm. There is always the grave possibility of in vitro incest.
Did you recognize yourself in the descriptions that were being...
Not very well, no. We did not.
Bob and I are both active in civic organizations, and we've been to city council many times and state hearings for different issues, and we could see the politics starting. And it wasn't really the issue, it was, well, who can get the most votes this way or the other? So there was that problem that I was upset because I had realized it had gone far enough that it could be turned down.
Good evening. State Health Commissioner Dr. James Kenley
Today gave his approval for the nation's first test tube baby project at Norfolk's Eastern Virginia Medical School.
4 months later, then, to the clash of conflicting opinions, the pioneer experimental work began. The Joneses gave themselves 3 years to assess success or failure.
In the light of the public hearing, we found ourselves in an interesting situation, one that I had never been in before, namely that we had stated to the world what we were going to do. And generally, in the pursuit of scientific matters, one works quietly, works hard, but the goals are not generally known, only to one's colleagues with whom one discusses it in a scientific matter. But here we were in a fishbowl, if you will. Everyone knew what we were trying to do, and it was an interesting and a curious situation.
Did you think that you would achieve a success during that 3 years?
I scarcely was able to think about it. I wasn't sure. I was quite unsure, as a matter of fact.
They began by following slavishly the Steptoe-Edwards technique. They used a laparoscope, a medical telescope, through which the surgeon could see into the woman's abdomen.
So that we can have a trocar that have an instrument which will allow us to manipulate some here.
They'd inflated the abdomen with carbon dioxide.
Let's have the grasping forceps. Here we're through. All right, is the carbon dioxide on?
They video recorded each operation as a matter of routine.
We can perhaps put on the camera at this point. Do we have an image on the screen? All right, here is the right ovary, which is quite available. I have grasped the uterovarian ligament, and there is her follicle there below. Good pressure down the shaft, Annabelle.
They attempted to aspirate the woman's single egg by drawing off, through a hollow needle, the fluid from the ripe follicle.
Now, hold it so. It looks like a pretty good follicle. You can see the needle. Stand by. In, suck, suck. Good collapse. Good collapse of the follicle. Do you have good negative pressure?
Okay, hold on, please, okay?
Okay.
I think that you are too deep.
All right.
Are you back a little bit?
Yes, I'll back a little bit.
Okay.
We had some collapse, though.
It's linking.
Now we're having some leaking around, as you can see. All right, a good collapse. So that's collapsed. Yeah, okay, let's irrigate that and see if they got anything in that. Okay. Suck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Must be there.
You want to take this, Margaret? For future purposes, that ovary is maybe available 50%.
Somewhere in the fluid, they hoped there was an egg.
Here's the tube on top of the ovary.
And in the laboratory beside the operating room, they became increasingly expert at finding it. But being governed by the woman's monthly cycle had drawbacks. The doctors had to wait for the patient to produce the egg, at any hour of the day or night. More important, after 13 months trying and 19 patients, there were still no pregnancies. Morale in the team was low. Yet that spring, 500 miles away in Boston, as Judy Carr talked things over with her family doctor, she knew nothing about the string of failures. She cared nothing about the moral issues.
I had no problems with it morally or any. I think the discussion came up that there was some hoorah about it, and we both chuckled about it.
Why?
I think he looked at me and said, "That's for other people to worry about," and we didn't worry about it. It was not something that was not an issue.
I guess it just didn't seem important at the time. The important thing was this was a way for us to have our own baby. That was foremost in our minds. That was number one. That's the only thing we thought about.
We looked at it from a very medically technical standpoint, and the fact that it was my egg and his sperm, and I have no problem with that at all. None whatsoever. And I never asked if they'd had any success. I was too polite to ask that question.
The last ampoule that you will receive.
In January 1981, the Joneses decided to modify the process. They decided to follow what other teams were doing, giving their patients a fertility drug to stimulate the woman into producing more than one egg a month.
Right, but no matter what...
At their weekly team meeting, they assessed the Australian success rate and discussed the implications of what they intended to do. Ed Wortham, reproductive biologist. Jairo Garcia, gynecologist. The Joneses, of course. Annabelle Acosta, gynecologist. And Cinda Veek, embryologist. Logically, they'd reasoned, if they had more than one egg to fertilize and put back into the patient, there must be a better chance of achieving a pregnancy.
They were aspirated, and one that seemed to be immature.
Wait a minute, we got 3 altogether?
3 eggs altogether, that's correct. Okay. At 43 hours, 2 of them had cleaved. The contact sheet here, which does have the photographs, everybody might be interested in seeing those. In the upper left-hand corner, we have...
At the meeting in April 1981, one of the members of the team had made an interesting forecast.
Annabelle Acosta, one of our team members, said, well, I've been going over the statistics of Australia, and I've looked at the English statistics, and I've talked to our statistician, and he tells me that we're going to have a success in the next 2 cases we do.
Of the next 2 cases in the files, one was Judy Dalton Carr, age 28, of Westminster, Massachusetts. The Jones team had, as usual, used ultrasound to monitor the growth of the follicle in Judy's ovary. They had photographed that growth.
Very good.
These are those photographs.
Okay, I think that's for today.
Do they look good?
Yes, that's very good size.
In mid-April, they were ready to try to recover her eggs.
You go into surgery absolutely not knowing. You know that because of the ultrasound and all of the other tests, that there indeed are some eggs, but, you know, whether or not they can get them, it's just something that's an unknown as you go into surgery. And it's nobody's fault if it doesn't work out properly, and it's just a chance you take.
The procedure in the operating room on April 15th, 1981, was just as it is today. Routinely, Judy had been stimulated with gonadotrophin to produce more than one egg.
The The tube is here.
This is the video of Judy's operation 9 months ago. They entered the follicle.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, clear fluid.
They recovered Judy's egg.
Thank you. All right, we're going.
In the laboratory, they judge the health of the egg, the oocyte. Ed Wortham.
Looks like we have an oocyte here.
What do you see down that microscope?
What I basically see is a large clump of cells with a rounded structure in the middle of the clump. These oocytes are very sticky sometimes because of the clump of cells. You have to be very careful pipetting them up so that they do not stick to the pipette.
What have you just done?
I've just taken a photograph of this particular oocyte. The cells in the cumulus look very nice, very nicely shaped.
I woke up in recovery, and Dr. Garcia came into the recovery room, and he was smiling, and I asked him if it was a happy smile or a polite smile, because there is definitely a difference. And he said, "You don't know?" And I said, "No, I don't know what's going on." He said, "Nobody told you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Oh, we have a beautiful egg, you know." And so we were pleased because that was step one. You know, it was like, good, but then we had a lot more to go through.
After it's been 8 hours in an incubator, they try to fertilize the egg with the husband's sperm or semen. They're successful 9 times out of 10.
Janine is drawing up the appropriate amount of semen which we will add to the oocyte. We try to add about 1.5 million motile sperm.
So that's the husband's sperm?
That is correct.
Now, what are you doing now?
I am retrieving the egg out of the incubator. I will bring it over, and Janine will add the semen. That takes a few moments for the sperm to get down to the oocyte.
So that is the moment of conception?
That is correct.
The Carrs had to wait 2 days to see if Judy's egg had fertilized.
We were out walking around outside, and a fellow looked over and he looked at us and he said, "I bet you're here for the same reason that I am." And I, just sort of looked, and nobody. This was all hush hush, and you weren't supposed to talk to anybody. And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And he said, "The in vitro thing." And I said, "Oh yeah." It was kind of amazing that he just looked at us and he knew that we were involved in it. So we got to know both he and his wife, and I think it broke up the time in between. It gave us somebody to talk to, somebody to go around town and eat meals with and chat with and compare notes on, our history and troubles and, misery loves company.
Judy's egg fertilized. It was photographed as it divided into 2 cells, then 3 cells. The principle of getting it back into the patient's womb is simple, but it's the most difficult part of the process. A tube or catheter is inserted through the vagina, and the fertilized egg or embryo should then embed itself in the womb, just as if it had entered normally from the fallopian tube. But too often, the transfer fails.
Here's our transfer catheter. We always flush the catheters just to make sure that it gets washed out well. It also tells us if we have good pressure there.
Throughout, they believe that attention to detail can affect the success rate.
Ready?
A little fluid.
Okay, fluid.
Got it.
Okay, some air.
Air.
The embryo is protected in the transfer catheter by having air and fluid both above and below it.
Approaching it.
Tell me when.
Okay, ready.
All right.
Got it.
Good. Okay, air. Okay, a little more fluid. Okay.
Okay.
Excellent.
It's then slipped into a sterile sheath to be taken into the operating room where the patient and the doctors are waiting for the transfer.
This has proven to be the most inefficient of all the steps in the process. I'm not sure that we completely understand why this is so, although my own suspicion, and it is a suspicion only, is that this is some measure of the health of the embryo.
Normal conception through intercourse is notoriously inefficient. A woman has only a 1 in 4 chance anyway of becoming pregnant every month. Does Dr. Jones feel then that both normally and with in vitro fertilization, the body rejects an abnormal embryo?
I think that's entirely likely. Now, the abnormality that I'm talking about is a subtle one, or abnormalities would be subtle ones, because all of them that are put back look more or less the same. But some of them grow and some don't. And it just may be that the ones that do not grow are not as healthy as the others.
By this time, did you know the odds against your being pregnant?
No, I had no idea. No.
Not even at this time?
No, none. I didn't, now they had done some other implants during the week, transfers I should say, I think that's the correct term. They had done some other transfers, and there were a lot of happy people walking around, a lot of happy girls, and so they had had a very successful week. And so I just assumed that there were lots of people floating around pregnant but quiet, you know. And so at this time I still didn't have any knowledge that something was going on.
Something unique?
Yes, indeed.
Judy went in for the embryo to be transferred into her womb on April 17th, 1981.
And I remember Dr. Garcia pacing and holding his hands like this, and I thought, this must be a tense situation, you know. I've never seen doctors that were anxious about anything. And they explained that the people in the lab had to be given all the time in the world, that this couldn't be rushed, and although I might be very uncomfortable, which I was upside down, and all my weight was basically on my neck, that once they were ready to go and they came out, the whole team just snapped into action, and everybody, you know, did their thing, and they ran out of walked very quickly out of the lab, and I couldn't see the rest of it. I'm sorry I couldn't see the rest of it, but it only took about 30 seconds. And then they went back, the lab people went back in the lab to check to make sure that everything had been implanted. And they seemed very pleased. And I remember they congratulated each other, and I thought, you know, it sort of hit me that, gee, they don't do this all the time. It's not something it's still incredibly exciting to them and very special to them.
This is News 3.
6 weeks later.
Good evening. The Eastern Virginia Medical School has achieved the first American in vitro pregnancy.
Tonight's top story, a pregnancy reported at Norfolk's in vitro fertilization clinic.
During the last several days, it has been determined and confirmed that a pregnancy has been established by the program of in vitro fertilization under the aegis of the EVMS and the Norfolk General Hospital.
If the pregnancy goes full term, this country's first test tube baby apparently is scheduled to be born Christmas week.
Judy had known from test results the day before the announcement that she was pregnant. But when she telephoned the Joneses in Norfolk, she still didn't appreciate just how unique this was.
They were very excited. And I thought, wow, you know, this is wonderful. It must, you know, feel good to them that, you know, because I'm sure they give out so much disappointing news. This is nice. Then Dr. Garcia got on the phone and he said, you know, you must understand. He said, you do know you're the first. And I went, you're kidding.
All we thought about was, this is our baby. That's, you know, what's the big deal? We can have a baby, and that's great. But we didn't think of this as being as big as it was. And it really hit me the first time when, you know, after the press release had been made and it hit the papers. I was out of town at the time, and picked up one of the papers and saw the headline, "Barren Woman Impregnated." I said, my God, that's my wife.
Really a miracle had taken place. I can't put that into words, I can't.
You use that word miracle?
It is definitely a miracle. I mean, although everything is the medical aspects, there's still something there that It's truly a miracle.
All the arrangements for Judy's baby were made months before.
This is our feed and grow nursery where babies...
He or she would go into the ordinary nursery with all the other normal babies. During 1981, there were 6 other pregnancies for the team to celebrate. They now believe their patients have a 1 in 5 chance of success. But thousands want to join the program. And because the older the woman, the greater the chance of an abnormal birth, there's now a top age limit of 35, which means that for the Smiths, unlucky on 4 occasions already, it's a race against time.
Can you handle disappointment a 5th time?
Yeah, I can. And we've thought about it a lot, and sometimes we're going to have to make the decision, you know, after a while, if it doesn't work, that it's just not meant for us. And we'll just have to do something else with our life or do other things with our lives.
There have been times when I first found out that I could not get pregnant that I was a little bit worried about what was going to happen down the end of the road.
You mean to your marriage?
Mm-hmm.
When I say it's a race against time, though, I mean at 35, you know you're at the top limit of Dr. Jones's program. And if it's going to happen for you...
Better be quick. Yeah, I realize that.
Why is it so important to you to have a child?
Sometimes I feel like I don't have to have one, but when I go over to my friend's house and she's got a little one, and I see how much fun they are, and I also know, you know, how terrible they can be after teaching little ones all day. But there's just a little lacking of something. We feel like we could really give some love to a child.
The girls who go through this 3 and 4 times, I think their courage is just unbelievable. I'm not sure I have the fortitude that they have. You know, it's...
Or to handle it.
Yeah, I admire them. Their courage is just amazing.
The patients in the program become very close. In a hotel a mile or so from the hospital, they wait for news of transfers, for news of pregnancies. They wait and hope. The treatment costs each couple $3,000. For many, it means financial sacrifice.
We've had to sell, we had some property, and we've had to, you know, make, I wouldn't say it's a sacrifice. It's your priorities become very different. You know, that's our first priority. I want desperately to have a child with my husband, like any other normal couple, and we just have to go about it a little differently.
How many times have you been here?
Twice.
What happened last time?
I went through the whole program. I had the laparoscopy, and they got 3 eggs, but they didn't fertilize.
And this time?
This time they got 3 eggs, and 1 of them fertilized.
And now?
And I had the implant, and I'm just waiting now.
When will you know?
Tuesday.
Louise, what about you? How many times have you been here?
Well, this is my first time.
What's happened to you?
It was a preliminary, and it was a natural cycle, and they got a good egg, and it's fertilized, and I'm very hopeful.
And when will you know?
Day after tomorrow.
This is my first time.
And how's it gone?
Great for first time.
What happened?
They got an egg and it fertilized, and I was implanted Sunday.
I've been here twice.
What happened last time?
Last time was a preliminary, and they didn't get an egg. And this time, I'm just waiting now for them to try and get an egg.
So all you need to be here is the ovary and the uterus, so don't give up. You just keep going and trying.
You really believe you're going to have a baby?
Oh, sure. Maybe not this time, but we'll just keep coming as long as they'll let us come or say we're too old. Sure. Yeah.
I just don't know what I would do if I couldn't be in this program and at least have this hope.
It's her only chance to have our child, and we're really looking forward to this little chance. I'm telling you.
Unless you're in the same spot, you really can't understand.
Does it change your view of the rest of the world? Does it change your view when you look at other married couples with children?
Does it make me bitter? No.
I just feel sad that that little baby that I see is not my little baby and that I can't hold it. But no, I don't. I'm happy for anybody who can have a child, but I just wish that that little baby was my little baby.
For some, the news in the clinic is better than they hoped for.
Twins!
Twins!
Here it is.
Here is the normal value here, and here are Kathy's values, and it looks as if she's had a double take.
Twins?
Yeah.
And Kathy is the only one that we had on day 11, and she was 19. So that's twice as much. So, and maybe Smuggler's is okay.
No. Oh, that's great.
How do you know that?
We're not completely sure, but we think it's very suggestive because this line here is the beta-HCG curve for singleton pregnancy, and we've seen that often enough to have some confidence in the level. But in this patient, and these are the first values we got just a few minutes ago, they're all elevated over the normal. And we know that the twin pregnancy is one reason that should have happened.
How long ago was this transfer done?
These values here are the 11th day, the 13th day, the 15th day, the 16th day. So the transfer was done, it's taken us 2 days to get these 18 days ago.
So early days yet?
Right, early days yet.
What the pregnancy tests had shown was a rise in the patient's hormone level and the suggestion of the growth of 2 placentae. It could be a bonus, because for every one of these women, a single pregnancy is enough. In a woman's normal monthly cycle, nature provides a 1 in 4 chance of conception through intercourse. Through in vitro fertilization at the Jones Clinic, Judy had a 1 in 10 chance, and she was lucky. Today, those of Jones's patients who undergo a laparoscopy have a 20% chance, he says, of becoming pregnant, 1 in 5. It's close to figures claimed by the other successful teams in Britain and Australia. Each team tries obsessively to improve every stage of the process. In the laboratory at Norfolk, they use mouse eggs to test the medium in which human egg and sperm will be brought together. They look for abnormalities in the growing mouse embryos that might be caused by the process of in vitro fertilization. They use the same fertility drugs as with humans to stimulate the mice to produce clutches of eggs. Ed Wortham.
When you use fertility drugs to stimulate the ovary and you produce more than one egg, what do you do with the eggs that you don't, as it were, put back into the mother, that you don't transfer?
Okay, you're speaking of the human eggs.
Right.
Okay, we put back all developing embryos back into the mother, and if we have abnormal eggs that do not grow properly or definitely abnormal, then we try to see why they are abnormal.
What if they fertilize and are not particularly progressing as you would wish?
We have been putting those back also. But again, if they are abnormal, if you can tell that they are abnormal, then certainly you wouldn't want to put them back in the mother.
The yardstick they use is whether or not the fertilized egg, the embryo, divides properly. There's a set timetable for its development, whether the division takes place inside the mother or in a petri dish. If the egg is cleaving or dividing normally, the team transfer it back to the patient.
Yeah.
These days, in the operating room, the Jones team routinely collect more than one egg.
Case number 2, we get the semen specimen at 4 o'clock, having collected it.
But would Dr. Jones use human embryos to experiment and improve the chance of pregnancy for his patients?
The question of the destruction of embryos for experimental purposes, let's say, does not happen to apply to the program at Norfolk, because we are very anxious to transfer any embryo that develops. But my own position is that one should not avoid that question simply because it is not a question for us, because I do believe there is an opportunity to learn a great deal by studying early embryos.
To learn, for instance, why one embryo takes and produces a baby, while another, identical under the microscope, does not.
One of the concerns that we have, or one of the mysteries, is why and the degree that the embryos that fail to thrive are in fact abnormal from the very first. We know that only by implication. So that if there were an opportunity to study the chromosomes, for example, of embryos at the 2-cell stage, the 4-cell stage, we then would have some notion as to what the degree of that abnormality is and what its precise nature was.
But it's this view that brings potential conflict with those who believe that life begins at conception. From the proposed Human Life Statute, Congress finds that the life of each human being begins at conception. And from the proposed Right to Life Act, a human being exists from conception.
My position is that this is not a biologically identifiable event. If one goes back in the history of the various commissions and others who have wrestled with this problem, various decisions have been made before, so that history is repeating itself in a way. It has been decided previously by various commissions that it began at various times, such as at fertilization, when motion, when the heart, and so on and so forth. As we go back and look at some of those, the arguments that were used seem to us naive and medieval.
Dr. Jones was encouraged in his views by this report from the Ethics Advisory Board in 1979. It said that in vitro fertilization was controversial and should not receive federal funds, but it shouldn't be stopped for ethical reasons. Father Richard McCormick was a member of that committee.
I feel that one can approach this procedure with full respect for the fertilized ovum. It's not the same respect you'd give a fully established pregnancy, but I don't think that life at that stage necessarily warrants the same type of respect.
But it's the biggest she has. We'll irrigate that and see if we're lucky.
But what if the egg weren't required or couldn't be carried by the woman from whom it was taken? Could it be transferred to a different woman, a surrogate mother? Could it be fertilized by someone other than the woman's husband? Could its nature be changed by genetic manipulation? The simple answer is yes, but the Norfolk team say they will have none of this. Mason Andrews is Vice Mayor of Norfolk and a gynecologist. He will deliver Judy Carr's baby. He founded the medical school. He brought the Joneses to Norfolk. What does he feel for those who criticize their work?
I respect their opinions completely.
And reserve the right to disagree with them?
Absolutely, and I would not recommend this process for them. The problem occurs when, in pursuit of their judgment, they speak very severely and incorrectly of things which I know to be factual and of motives which I'm quite familiar with.
You mean that they impugn the motives which do not exist either in you or your team?
That's correct. One has to make his own judgment, and I would call your attention to the fact that the American Medical Association has, in fact, found favorably for it. We have a clinical program to help patients achieve pregnancy, and no experimental deviation from that has presented itself, nor would it likely occur here.
But you know that as we learn more about the very beginnings of life, as the genetic manipulation of cells and embryos becomes more and more familiar to scientists, it must open the door to other processes which you may and would yourself frown upon.
I suppose that's true. There are, of course, in place already safeguards if safeguards are needed. We have institutional review committees that would necessarily have to approve anything that is done in the human area. So I think a mechanism is already in place. But quite over and above that, I'm not sure that it's entirely possible to regulate human behavior by regulations, and I suspect that in the final analysis, the main control we have on this is the integrity and best intentions of those involved.
To trust the scientist.
To trust the scientist.
The Ethics Board report that Father McCormick signed in 1979 was unanimous, but now he sounds a warning.
I believe there are a great number of people who feel that we shouldn't be doing this. Their evaluation of nascent life at that period would lead them to believe that we're treating this fertilized ovum with disrespect, we're tampering, we're exposing it to possible malformations, and so on. In discussion of these matters, there's a question of something being straightforwardly right or wrong, and there's another level at which we might consider some of these developments, and that is the social drift, the question of wisdom of a society moving in that direction. I have to wonder whether it's wise at this time for a funding decision of the government to support this type of thing, whether it's wise. It clearly is not right or wrong as far as I see it. And but I did at the time the Ethics Advisory Board was meeting on this, I had fairly strong convictions that this was not the time to fund.
Should there be funding for this work?
I still myself feel no.
For Judy and Roger Carr, the legitimate concerns about ethical safeguards and the images of a brave new world that some would conjure from the petri dishes are not among their top priorities. To them, it's all rather irrelevant.
I just can't possibly understand how anyone could think that, what the Joneses have done or what was done in England. I don't see how anybody could say that this is immoral or that, people are playing God. I mean, to me, if they take our little baby when it's born and they hold it in its hands, how anybody can say that that is wrong, I can't understand. I don't know how, I could explain to them that there's nothing wrong. Here is a human life, a newborn baby. Now tell me what is immoral about that.
For 9 months, and for 8 years before that, through a series of crises and operations, the Carrs have waited for their baby.
It hasn't been easy, and not all husbands would want to be involved in this.
She knew all along that after that first one, to a great extent, she was putting her own welfare on the line. She wanted it that badly, and that just makes me love her that much more.
What do you feel for the Joneses at this time?
Boy, I've been thinking about when the baby is born, what I'm going to say to them. And it's just something that's very, very difficult to put into words. The appreciation, the admiration for them. I mean, up to this point, it's almost it's like they're going to be grandparents. They care. They're involved to that extent that this is not just a medical accomplishment. They really genuinely care about Judy and I and about the child. And until I'm faced with that moment, I really don't know what I'm going to say.
The day before the baby was due, Howard Jones was worried. A series of ultrasounds had revealed that the baby was small, about 5 pounds, and small babies have a greater chance of being born with abnormalities. Jones's critics believe that fertilization in vitro causes abnormalities.
I guess the thing that bothers me more than anything is that the smallness of the baby is an expression of some abnormality of the child, including serious abnormalities. And we must, of course, be prepared for this psychologically and in every other way. But we hope we're dealing with a small, normal baby.
When you say prepared psychologically, what do you mean?
Well, I mean we must be prepared at the moment of birth to have a terrible disappointment.
Judy Carr knew nothing of these concerns. She was taken to the operating room at 7:30 a.m. on December 28th. The operation was to be a caesarean section, because of the baby's size, because of the small additional risk to the baby in normal childbirth.
Got it nice and toasty in here. That's for the baby. That O2 we talked about.
Judy was anesthetized by spinal injection.
Kind of check the upper end of that incision, honey, to see. Suction the ductor word.
See about the quality of the blood.
Suction to the wall. Now you got a feeling pushing on you. Is that okay?
Howard Jones and Judy, who was fully conscious, chatted throughout the operation.
Bladder blade out. Bladder blade out. Now don't push. Don't push. Be ready with the suction. Baby wants to cry. Hear it, Judy? Ultrasound was right.
It's a girl.
It's a girl. Oh my.
Yeah, put it down a bit. Let her look at it.
Oh my hair.
It was 7:46 a.m.
One piece. Looks good. Looks good. It's good, good, baby. All right. Tell you what we'll do now.
Squeezing Roger's fingers just as hard as she can squeeze.
Elizabeth, Jordan, Carl.
She looks good?
No, she is really a lovely baby.
She's
strong and healthy.
That's all I want to hear. Oh boy.
You see her?
No. I like your hat. Hello.
Beautiful.
She's something else. Well, you don't look too thrilled with life there.
Oh, she's doing great. She really is.
Hello. She is kind of tiny though, isn't she?
She looks well nourished. You can tell by the skin, the quality of the skin, and the thickness of the skin folds.
Well, we'll let her go back to sleep. I think so. Oh dear.
Cut this one. Cut the show. Okay. You want to go to the nursery with me? Or you want to stay here?
Yeah, you don't have to stay here for this.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Bye-bye. Okay. Yes, sir.
Sound is fine.
Absolutely.
The baby set out for the nursery in the arms of pediatrician Dr. Fred Worth.
Little girl.
Nice.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
she's terrific.
Think? We don't have twins here.
All right, ladies, here she is, Elizabeth. All right. Yeah, I knew y'all would like it to be a girl.
We had said boy.
That doesn't give you any advantage over a boy, so she doesn't need that.
Didn't have to be that good.
No. All right.
She's beautiful.
Yep, she's perfect. Couldn't be better.
Well, I'm going to go tell my mom and Judy's mother and let them know.
Now, stand by camera 3. And Stan Darfin on sports. On camera 3, stand by Mike and Q.
America's first test tube baby was born early this morning at Norfolk General Hospital. The announcement came at a news conference that ended just a few minutes ago, and we have this live Newscam 3 report from David Hathcock.
Early this morning, the obstetrics team gathered at Norfolk General Hospital. The announcement itself was made by Dr. Howard Jones.
This morning at 7:46, a daughter was born to Mrs. Judith Carr, a 28-year-old schoolteacher. The father is Mr. Roger Carr, a 30-year-old mechanical engineer.
Unrecognized at the press conference, the father.
Roger, you know you said you didn't know what you were going to say to Howard Jones.
Yeah.
What did you say?
I don't think I said anything. I think I was speechless. I hugged him. You know, thank you just wasn't a big enough word. The one word just doesn't express the joy and that Judy and I both feel. You know, this little miracle of life that they made possible to bring into our lives, and you just can't express the kind of gratitude that you feel and put that all into one phrase.
Judy, how's she doing?
She's doing just fine. She really is. She's adorable. She's just so precious. And asleep.
You've seen the newspapers today, and you know the telegrams that have come and the offers that have been made to you. Does it worry you that she may carry the label, test tube baby?
I really don't. No, it doesn't worry me. I think that this will all die down, and she'll just be our Elizabeth.
This is a baby who grew from the follicle, through conception and gestation, in a way no other baby in America has ever done before. What is this baby for Dr. Howard Jones?
Well, obviously a milestone. But there's a lot of work to do still because the program is not as efficient as it should be. So that I guess it's maybe another beginning rather than the end.
Oh, hello, Elizabeth. How are you? Huh? What's the matter? Oh, they're almost. Yeah. Are you getting wet? I'm trying to. I think you're doing funny things. What do you think? Huh? Oh, she's something. What are you doing? Oops, did you hiccup? Huh? Oh, yeah.
No. You're gonna go to sleep on me again, huh? Gonna go to sleep. She's beautiful.
The material on this video cassette is protected by copyright. It is for private use only, and any other use, including copying, reproducing, or performance in public, in whole or in part, is prohibited by law.